I want to start today by asking you, the listener, to picture something. Just picture a massive, incredibly powerful system.
Right, like a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah, exactly. A giant corporation or, a sprawling government bureaucracy. Or honestly, even something as intimate as a decades-long marriage.
Sure.
Now, I want you to imagine this system is beginning to rot.
Oh, wow.
It's a slow decay, right?
Mhm.
Efficiency is dropping, the quality is slipping, the moral core is just starting to hollow out.
Things are falling apart.
Exactly. And common sense in practically every economics textbook ever written, by the way, tells us that the ultimate cure for this rot is freedom of choice.
Right, the free market.
Yeah. The logic is that if you introduce perfect, frictionless competition into that environment, the failing system gets a brutal wake-up call. It'll either instantly fix its flaws, or it'll just be replaced by something better.
That is the fundamental bedrock of how we think markets work.
Right, but what if I told you that this assumption is completely, entirely wrong?
Wait, really?
Yeah. What if I told you that under certain conditions, total freedom of choice and perfect competition are exactly the things that will accelerate a system's absolute irreversible destruction?
I mean, that is a jarring premise.
Yeah.
It essentially asks us to unlearn the most basic principles of market discipline,
Completely.
We all just operate on this baseline assumption that adding an alternative always makes an organization stronger because it forces them to compete.
It sounds like common sense.
Right. But the reality of human behavior and the actual mechanics of how organizations process failure is far more counterintuitive. Sometimes opening up an escape hatch doesn't save the people on the ship.
What does it do?
It just guarantees the ship sinks faster and quieter than it ever would have otherwise.
That is wild. And that brings us to today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to explore one of the most fascinating and, frankly, mind-bending frameworks in modern social science.
It really is a game changer.
We are pulling from the legendary insights of the economist Albert O. Hirschman, specifically dissecting the source material around his masterpiece, Exit, Voice, and Loyalty.
Such an incredible piece of work.
It really is. We're going to look at the anatomy of how things fall apart, because whether we want to admit it or not, entropy is a guarantee.
Yeah, nothing lasts forever without maintenance.
Exactly. Lapses in quality, sudden bursts of incompetence, a slow slide into mediocrity. These things are inevitable in literally any human organization.
Unavoidable.
So our focus today isn't on preventing the decay. It's on how we as humans react to it, and how the systems we build either survive that reaction or perish because of it.
And when you strip away all the complexity from Hirschman's work, he basically identified that humans have two distinct weapons to fight back when a system they belong to starts to decline.
Okay, two weapons. What's the first one?
The first weapon is exit.
Exit, like leaving.
Exactly. This is the ultimate market mechanism. It is cold, it is anonymous, and it is entirely transactional.
So like you buy bar soap, you don't like the smell, you just stop buying that brand.
Right. Or you hold a stock, the earnings drop, you sell it.
You work a job you hate, you hand in your notice and walk out the door.
You vote with your feet. That's exit.
Got it. And the second weapon?
The second weapon is voice. If exit is the cold market, voice is the messy, loud, highly emotional world of politics.
Oh, I see.
Voice is the decision to stay exactly where you are and make a scene.
Like writing a furious 5-page letter to the CEO?
Yes. Or organizing a union, standing in the middle of a town hall meeting, screaming at a local politician.
Demanding to speak to the manager.
Exactly, the classic voice. And the central tension we are exploring today, the real mind-bender, is how modern society, and particularly mainstream economics, vastly overrates the silent power of exit,
While underestimating voice.
dangerously underestimating the necessity of direct, confrontational voice. We've built an entire global architecture obsessed with giving people the ability to walk away.
Right, infinite choices.
And we are completely blind to the fact that sometimes making it difficult to leave is the only thing that forces people to stay and actually fix the problem.
That is such a huge claim. So I want to prove just how wrong our intuition about competition really is.
Let's do it.
Let's look at a real-world disaster, from the source material that acts like a complete slap in the face to basic free market theory.
The Nigerian railway.
Yes. So we intuitively believe that if a monopoly provides a terrible service, introducing a competitor will force the monopoly to improve.
That's the textbook theory, yeah.
But the story of the Nigerian state railway system completely breaks that.
It's perhaps the most elegant demonstration of the blind spot in economic theory.
Set the stage for us.
So historically, the Nigerian Railway was a state-run monopoly. They were responsible for transporting heavy freight, particularly agricultural goods like peanuts, from the interior regions of northern Nigeria all the way down to the coastal ports.
Okay, so a massive logistical operation.
Huge.
Yeah.
And for a long time, it was the only real option.
Because there were no good roads.
Right. And as happens with many state monopolies, it began to suffer from severe entropy.
It got bad.
Very bad. Incredibly inefficient. Management was notoriously poor. Trains are constantly delayed. The overall service was universally considered terrible.
So you have this massive failing bureaucracy, and the customers are trapped. They have to use the train to get their goods to market, so they just suffer through the delays and the incompetence.
Exactly. But then a technological shift happens.
Yeah.
The road networks improve, and a completely new competitor enters the arena.
The trucks.
Cheap, highly efficient motorized trucking.
Wow. Okay, so suddenly the peanut farmers and the freight companies actually have a choice.
They're no longer captives of the railway monopoly.
Now, if we apply standard economic theory, this is the exact moment the railway should experience a massive wake-up call, right?
Oh, absolutely. Facing fierce competition from trucks, losing revenue by the day, the railway management should have been forced to ruthlessly cut inefficiencies.
Fire the bad managers, overhaul the scheduling, win back the market share.
Right. That's what we expect.
But I'm looking at the historical outcome here, and that is absolutely not what happened.
Not even close.
The railway didn't experience a renaissance. It just collapsed into a state of permanent, comfortable mediocrity.
Yeah.
It never got better. It just stayed terrible forever. How does that make any sense? If a business loses its customers to a cheaper competitor, why wouldn't they fight back?
To understand why they failed to improve, we have to look very closely at who actually utilized the exit option.
The people who left.
Right. When the trucks arrived, the customer base didn't just leave in a random proportionate sample.
So who left first?
The first people to abandon the railway and switch to trucking were the most quality-sensitive customers.
Ooh.
These were the highly organized businesses, the ones operating on tight margins, the ones who cared intensely about strict timetables, reliability, and efficiency.
They were the most demanding clients the railway had.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. The people who care the most about quality are the first to notice when an alternative offers better quality. So they just take their money and bolt.
But think about the counterfactual here. Imagine the trucks had never been invented.
Okay.
Imagine those highly demanding, highly organized, very wealthy customers were securely locked into the railway monopoly with absolutely no exit option. What would they have done about the terrible service?
Well, they wouldn't have just sat there and taken it. I mean, if their businesses were losing money because the trains were late and they had no other way to ship their goods, they would have gone nuclear.
Exactly.
They would have used their voice. They would have leveraged their wealth to lobby the government, write furious op-eds, threaten politicians, demand the resignation of the managers. They would have made the lives of the railway administrators an absolute living hell until the trains ran on time.
That is the exact dynamic. Those specific customers possess the highest capacity for effective disruptive voice. They were the actual engine of structural reform.
Wow.
But the moment the trucks provided an easy exit, that engine was completely removed from the system.
Because why bother fighting?
Right. Instead of spending months fighting a grueling political battle to reform a corrupt state bureaucracy, they simply picked up the phone, hired a trucking company, and moved on with their lives. They took the path of least resistance.
It reminds me of a restaurant in my neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for years it was the only place that served this very specific type of regional cuisine. The food was okay, but the service was agonizingly slow.
I know the type.
Right. And the people who cared about the authenticity of the food would still go, but they would complain to the owner constantly, like, the soup is cold, or we waited an hour for a table.
So they were annoying, but they kept the owner on his toes.
Exactly. Then a massive, highly efficient competitor opens up 3 blocks away, serving the exact same cuisine.
Let me guess what happened.
All the food critics, all the demanding foodies, they instantly stopped going to the old place. They took the exit.
Naturally.
And you'd think the old chef would say, oh no, I'm losing my best customers, I need to cook faster. But he didn't.
He didn't care.
He just got incredibly lazy, because the only people left in his dining room were the people who didn't care what they ate.
The ones who never complained.
Yeah. They were the tourists, or people who just wanted a cheap beer. They never complained. The chef was actually thrilled the foodies were gone.
The Nigerian railway management experienced that exact same psychological relief.
They're happy.
Thrilled. And we have to factor in the financial structure here, too. Because the railway was a public enterprise, it was subsidized by the state treasury.
Oh, right. It wasn't a private company.
Exactly.
Here.
A private company would instantly go bankrupt if it lost revenue. But here, the state essentially absorbed the financial shock.
So the management didn't even feel the pain of the lost revenue.
But they absolutely felt the glorious relief of the lost complaints.
They got rid of their biggest headache.
The introduction of competition didn't discipline the railway at all. It insulated it.
By giving the loudest complainers an escape hatch.
Right. The free market successfully drained the organization of the only force that could have compelled it to change. The remaining customers were the ones who were indifferent to delays or just too poor to arrange trucking.
The feedback loop was totally severed.
Completely. And this is the profound blind spot of economists who idolize voting with your feet. They view friction as an inefficiency to be eliminated.
But in human organizations, friction is good.
Friction, the screaming, the complaining, the confrontational voice is often the only mechanism that actually drives improvement.
That completely flips the script on how we view customer complaints. We treat complaints like a symptom of a dying business, but they are actually the immune system fighting off the decay.
That's a great way to put it.
If everyone just walks away silently, the system dies in its sleep. Which leads me to something the source material explores that is even more unnerving.
The logical extreme.
Yeah. If a little bit of competition allows a bad organization to get lazy and rot in peace, what happens if we take the market to its absolute limit?
The quasi-perfect competition.
Right. What if we create a perfectly competitive market where the consumers are incredibly smart, hyper alert, and have perfect information?
You are stepping into what the framework considers the ultimate death trap.
Wait, why is it a trap? The whole goal of consumer advocacy, of the internet, of Yelp reviews, is to make the consumer as alert and informed as possible.
True.
If every consumer is perfectly rational and hypervigilant, shouldn't that force a company to maintain absolute perfection? If they know we are watching their every move, they can't ever let their quality slip.
The theory assumes that hyper-alert customers will keep management terrified and focused. But the mechanical reality of how organizations recuperate from failure dictates something entirely different.
What's the reality?
The counterintuitive truth is that a complex system actually requires a very specific mixture of alert customers and entirely clueless, sluggish customers to survive.
Clueless customers.
Yes. If you remove the clueless customers, the company will die at the speed of light.
Okay, I need you to walk me through the mechanics of that. Why would a company actively need clueless customers? That sounds insane.
Let's construct this scenario. Imagine a highly competitive industry with several firms producing nearly identical products.
Like, I don't know, toothbrushes.
Perfect. Now imagine that the consumers in this market are incredibly sophisticated. They use software to track prices. They read every single consumer report. Their demand is hyper-elastic.
I know everything.
They are, in economic terms, perfectly alert. Now, one of these companies experiences a random, completely normal lapse in operational efficiency.
Just a normal mistake.
Right. A machine calibration is slightly off, or a new middle manager makes a minor scheduling error. The quality of their product drops by exactly 1%.
A tiny, almost imperceptible mistake?
To a normal consumer, imperceptible. But to our hyper-alert consumer base, it registers immediately.
Because they have perfect information.
Exactly. Because every single customer is perfectly rational, they all detect the 1% drop in quality at the exact same millisecond.
Oh.
And because there are perfect competitors offering the baseline quality, what is the entirely rational move for every single customer to make?
They hit the exit button simultaneously. Every single one of them cancels their subscription, stops buying the product, and moves to the competitor on the exact same day.
Precisely. The mass exodus is instantaneous. Now, put yourself in the shoes of the management team at that company.
Okay.
In order to fix a problem, to fire the bad manager, to recalibrate the machine, to source better materials, management first needs to be made aware that a problem exists.
Right. They need data.
They need time to gather that data, analyze the quarterly sales reports, discover the root cause of the quality drop, and implement a solution.
But they don't have a quarter. They don't even have a week. By the time the CEO wakes up and checks the sales dashboard, revenue has dropped to zero.
Exactly. The company is completely bankrupt.
The system punished them with the corporate death penalty for a microscopic misdemeanor.
Management never even had the opportunity to engage their recuperation mechanisms. They were killed before they even knew they were sick.
That's brutal.
And this is a massive net loss for society as a whole. This was not a fundamentally flawed company. It was a good company that made a highly fixable error.
But the hypervigilance just nuked them.
Destroyed the structural capital, the jobs, and the infrastructure instantly.
I see it. If everyone is perfectly alert, there is no buffer. It actually makes me think about modern dating culture.
Oh, that's an interesting parallel.
Specifically with the rise of algorithmic dating apps. In the past, if you were dating someone and they revealed a minor flaw, maybe they were a bit messy or they made a thoughtless comment, you didn't immediately have 5,000 other highly curated options sitting in your pocket.
Right, there was friction.
You had friction, you had a degree of lock-in, so you used your voice, you had an argument, you communicated your frustration, and the other person had the opportunity to receive that feedback, adjust, and grow.
The relationship had a recuperation mechanism.
Exactly. But now we are approaching a quasi-perfect competitive market for human attention.
The exit option is always hovering right there.
Right on your phone screen. If a partner makes a 1% error, the temptation is to simply ghost them.
Take the frictionless exit.
Because the algorithm is promising a flawless competitor just one swipe away. But because everyone has the exit option so readily available, nobody ever stays around long enough to allow the other person to fix their flaws.
Nobody gets the grace period required for personal growth.
The relationships die at the speed of light over minor infractions, and the whole system just fractures.
That is a perfect analogy. The human element requires a shock absorber. And in a corporate ecosystem, the sluggish or inert customers act as that exact shock absorber.
The clueless ones.
Right. They're the customers who buy out of habit, who don't read the reviews, or who are just too busy to care that the quality dropped by 1%.
So while the alert customers are fleeing,
while they are hitting the exit, which provides the initial sharp drop in revenue that serves as a warning siren to management, the sluggish customers keep buying the product.
they provide the vital cash flow that keeps the lights on.
Exactly. They buy management the time to hear the siren, find the fire, and put it out.
So you need the alert customers to act as the smoke detector, but you desperately need the clueless customers to buy you the time to grab the fire extinguisher.
If the entire building is made of smoke detectors, the building just collapses the moment a match is struck.
Wow. Okay, so we've established that hyperfast exits can kill a system prematurely, but I want to pivot and look at the people who don't have the ability to leave.
The captive audience.
Right. When the highly alert elite customers detect a drop in quality and decide to take their money and walk out the door, what happens to the people left behind in the burning building?
This gets into some really heavy sociological territory.
The source material frames this around public goods, specifically looking at the dynamic between public and private schools. I've got to ask, why is the prosperity of expensive private schools often the starting point for the absolute ruin of local public education?
This is one of those socially devastating applications of the exit versus voice framework. It really forces us to confront how privilege dictates structural decay.
How does it start?
Let's examine a typical municipal public school district. The quality of education is a highly complex, fragile output, right? It depends on funding, teacher morale, administrative competence, community involvement.
Lots of moving parts.
Now, imagine the public school district experiences a noticeable but moderate decline in quality.
Maybe the city council cuts the budget, or a highly effective superintendent gets replaced.
Exactly. Who are the very first people to detect this decline?
The most involved parents, I assume.
Right. It is almost always the most affluent, highly educated, and upwardly mobile parents.
Mm-hmm.
They are hyper-focused on educational metrics. They have the time to monitor the curriculum, and they are intensely sensitive to any threat to their kids' futures.
They are the alert customers.
Yes. And crucially, because of their wealth and social mobility, they possess a highly accessible exit option.
They can afford private school.
They do not have to wait around and hope the public school gets better. They can immediately withdraw their children and enroll them in expensive, exclusive private schools.
The common narrative when this happens is entirely focused on the money, right? People say when the rich parents leave, they take their tax dollars or their per pupil funding with them, and that financial loss is what starves the public school.
The financial loss is undeniably damaging, sure. But Hirschman's framework reveals that it is secondary to the loss of a much more critical asset.
What's that?
When those elite parents take the exit, they take their voice with them. And their voice was the most powerful weapon the school system had against decay.
Because they are the squeaky wheel.
They are far more than just squeaky wheels. Affluent, highly educated parents possess immense social capital.
Right, they know how the system works.
They know how to navigate complex bureaucracies. They're not intimidated by school board officials. They know how to organize a PTA, how to mobilize the local press, how to threaten a lawsuit, or demand audits of the school's budget.
They have real power.
When the school system degrades, these parents have the exact skill set required to force the administration into uncomfortable, aggressive reform.
But the moment they sign the check for the private school tuition?
It's no longer their problem. Their motivation to fight the public school board drops to zero. They have purchased their way out of the friction.
Oh, wow.
Now look at who is left behind in the public school system.
The families who can't afford the private school?
Often these are families working multiple jobs who may not have the time to attend a 7:00 p.m. school board meeting, or who lack the specific social capital required to effectively bully a deeply entrenched administrative bureaucracy.
So the administration looks out at the community and realizes the most terrifying, demanding critics are gone.
The pressure is completely off.
The people left behind might be angry, but they don't have the leverage to force a change. And just like the Nigerian railway, the school administration breathes a sigh of relief.
And the decay is allowed to accelerate unchecked. The private school's prosperity is literally built on the extraction of the public school's immune system.
It creates a permanent underclass mechanism. The exit of the elite condemns the captive audience to an accelerating death spiral of quality.
Exactly.
And this dynamic isn't just an accidental tragedy of the public sector. In the corporate world, this exact phenomenon is sometimes engineered on purpose.
Oh, absolutely.
Which leads us to one of the most cynical yet brilliant revelations in corporate strategy: the secret dream of the lazy monopolist.
It really shatters the cartoonish image we have of monopolies.
Right. We are taught that a monopoly is this hyper-aggressive, ruthless shark that wants to devour every single competitor and control 100% of the market.
A profit-maximizing monopoly behaves that way, yes. If the sole goal is the absolute maximization of shareholder value, you crush the competition.
Good.
But human beings run monopolies, and human beings do not always want to maximize profit. Often, what they truly want to maximize is their own comfort.
They want an easy life.
They want to play golf on Fridays.
Wow.
They want to avoid stressful board meetings. They want a quiet, unbothered life. This is the lazy monopolist.
I've got a question then. Why would a lazy monopolist actually view a little bit of competition not as a threat, but as a massive gift?
To understand the lazy monopolist, you have to understand who they hate the most.
Who do they hate?
The absolute worst nightmare for a lazy corporate executive is a highly demanding, hypercritical, perfectionist customer.
Karens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These are the customers who call the support line constantly, who demand refunds for the slightest imperfection, who write lengthy public reviews dissecting the product's flaws, and who threaten lawsuits.
They require an immense amount of corporate energy to pacify.
They're the people who constantly use their voice. They create massive friction for the management team.
So how does competition help the monopolist get rid of them?
Well, suppose a small boutique competitor opens up across the street. This competitor charges premium prices, but offers highly personalized, top-tier service.
Okay.
A traditional, profit-maximizing monopolist would try to drive them out of business. But the lazy monopolist realizes something profound. Who is going to be the very first to jump ship and switch to the new boutique competitor?
The hypercritical nightmare customers, the people who care about the top-tier service, will gladly pay the premium to escape the monopoly.
Yes. The boutique competitor acts as a targeted extraction tool. It siphons off the exact demographic of customers who are causing all the headaches.
And the lazy monopolist just watches them leave.
They watch them leave and they celebrate. By willingly sacrificing a small percentage of their market share, the lazy monopolist successfully facilitates the exit of their most vocal critics.
Leaving them with what?
Leaving them with a vast, highly profitable ocean of captive, clueless, or entirely apathetic customers.
Unbelievable.
Customers who will accept a steady degradation in product quality without ever raising their voice.
So the lazy monopolist has effectively purchased the freedom to let their product rot. And they bought that freedom by allowing a competitor to steal their best customers.
The illusion of a free market is actually being used to insulate the monopoly from any real accountability.
It is genuinely infuriating when you realize how often this probably happens in the real world. We look at a market with 2 or 3 players and assume it's competitive, but they might just be carefully dividing the audience based on who is willing to complain so they can all enjoy a quieter life.
It's a very comfortable arrangement for the executives.
But I want to scale this up. Because of this mechanism, the idea that the ability to escape dictates whether a system improves or rots, it doesn't just apply to shopping or choosing a school.
No, it goes much further.
According to the source material, it shapes the entire political destiny of nations. It dictates whether a country experiences centuries of stable peace or endless, bloody cycles of revolution.
We are moving from the microeconomics of the firm to the macro politics of the state.
Right. And when we talk about exit and voice at the national level, we're talking about real world-altering stuff. Emigration, exile, revolution.
Exactly. The framework presents a really fascinating geopolitical comparison between the historical stability of Latin America and the historical stability of Japan.
Let's dive into the Latin American side first. The material describes a phenomenon that structurally undermined political stability in the region for generations, centered around something called the exile loophole. How did this work in practice?
Think about the geographic and diplomatic reality of the Latin American continent historically. You have a massive landmass divided into numerous neighboring states with porous borders, many sharing similar linguistic and cultural roots.
Okay, so it's relatively easy to move around.
Very easy. Now imagine you are a political leader, a general, or the head of a powerful faction in one of these countries. You engage in a high-stakes power struggle, a legislative battle, or maybe an attempted coup.
Yeah.
And you lose.
Your faction is defeated. You are now the opposition.
In a closed system, a defeated opposition is forced to endure the agonizing, humiliating process of political compromise.
They have to figure out how to live together.
Right. They have to sit across the table from their enemies, swallow their pride, and use their voice to negotiate a new social contract so they can survive within the same country.
But in Latin America...
In Latin America, they didn't have to do that. They had a remarkably easy exit option.
They could just leave.
They crossed the border. Seeking political asylum in a neighboring country was an incredibly common, widely accepted, and almost polite resolution to a political dispute.
Oh, wow.
The neighboring states were often more than happy to host the exiled elites. It was seen as a civilized way out of a deadly problem.
But the material argues that this civilized way out was actually a poison pill for long-term stability. Why? Why does easy escape ruin political order?
Because the friction of compromise is the only thing that builds durable institutions.
That friction again.
Yes. If every time a political faction loses a vote or faces a crisis, their immediate response is to pack their bags and flee to Montevideo or Buenos Aires, the difficult work of nation-building never happens.
Because they never have to actually face their rivals.
The voice mechanism, the screaming, the debating, the painful forging of a mutual constitution was constantly short-circuited by the convenience of physical escape.
They just opted out.
Because they could always leave. They never learned how to live together. They just kept cycling through regimes, exiling the losers, and waiting for the exiled losers to gather enough resources to launch a counter-revolution from across the border.
So the exit option acted as a pressure valve, but it let all the pressure out before the engine could actually do any work.
Exactly. Now, contrast that with the geography of Japan.
Okay, what makes Japan the perfect foil here?
Japan is an isolated island nation. During crucial periods of its history, particularly the Tokugawa shogunate, the nation was effectively sealed off from the rest of the world.
Closed borders.
Emigration was practically impossible. There was no friendly neighboring country offering asylum just a short horse ride across a border.
The exit option was completely removed from the table.
Entirely. And when you remove the exit option from a highly factionalized, deeply divided society, you force a profoundly different psychological reality upon the political elites.
What happened?
You are trapped in a room with your worst enemies, and the doors are welded shut. You cannot run away. Therefore, you have absolutely no choice but to figure out how to coexist.
You're forced to use voice.
To its absolute maximum capacity. The impossibility of exit forced the rival Japanese factions to sit down, negotiate, establish incredibly complex rules of engagement, and forge deeply ingrained social contracts.
They built a culture of intense internal cohesion and compromise, not because they naturally liked each other more, but because they literally had nowhere else to go.
The physical constraint of the island forced the creation of a durable political structure, which brings up an incredibly vital point of introspection when we apply this framework to the United States.
I was hoping we would get to this, because if Japan is the ultimate example of a society forged by the impossibility of exit, America is the exact opposite.
100%.
The entire DNA of the United States its entire mythological origin story, is literally built on the glorification of the exit option.
It is the defining characteristic of the American ideology. Historians have written extensively about this. Think about the founding of the colonies.
The Pilgrims, right.
The initial population was comprised of people who looked at the religious persecution, the rigid class structures, and the feudal stagnation of Europe, and they made a collective decision. They did not stay and launch a revolution to fix Europe.
They didn't use their voice.
No. They took the ultimate perilous exit across the Atlantic Ocean.
The American identity literally started with the phrase, if you don't like it here, leave.
And that philosophy did not stop at the eastern seaboard. For over 2 centuries, the defining feature of the American continent was the seemingly infinite western frontier.
Manifest destiny.
Right. Whenever a community in the East became too crowded, whenever religious factions clashed, whenever the political or economic system felt oppressive, the cultural answer was never stay and reform this system.
The answer was go west.
The frontier was a massive continent-sized safety valve. It was the physical manifestation of the exit option.
You don't like the town, Mayor. Pack up the wagon and build a new town in Ohio. You don't like Ohio. Keep walking until you hit California.
This ingrained generational habit of relying on physical displacement to solve social problems has left a massive blind spot in the modern American psyche.
How so?
It has created a cultural ideology that views walking away as the ultimate expression of liberty and views staying to complain as an exhausting waste of time.
Oh, that is so true.
When faced with a broken system today, a decaying inner-city school district, a corrupt local government, a dysfunctional corporate workplace, the deeply programmed American instinct is physical flight.
We don't organize a strike, we change jobs.
We don't run for city council to fix the potholes. We move to a gated community in the suburbs. We use physical distance as a substitute for social revolution.
We abandon the failing institutions, leaving behind only the captive populations who cannot afford the moving van.
We are addicted to exit.
But that raises a terrifying question. What happens to a society that is addicted to exit when the frontier finally closes, when there is no more west to conquer, when the suburbs become too expensive, when the borders are shut?
That is the breaking point.
What happens in a political system when a specific group of highly motivated people realize they literally have nowhere else to go?
When exit is abruptly removed from a population that desperately wants change, they have only one weapon left. They weaponize their voice.
And it gets loud.
And they do it with a ferocity that can completely hijack a system. This dynamic explains one of the most baffling illusions of modern democracy.
Which is what?
Why two-party political systems are constantly held hostage by their most extreme radical fringes.
Okay, I want to dive deep into the political science of this. And to you listening, I want to make it explicitly clear. As we dissect this next concept, we are acting purely as mechanics looking at an engine.
We are not taking political sides.
Right, we are not validating left-wing or right-wing ideologies. We are looking strictly at the mathematical and psychological models of how political parties operate according to the source material.
Exactly. To understand the hostage dynamic, we first have to understand the baseline theory of how political scientists assume a two-party system works. This is known as the hotelling model.
Break down the hotelling model for us.
Imagine a straight horizontal line. This line represents the political spectrum. On the far left, you have the extreme progressive voters. On the far right, you have the extreme conservative voters.
In the middle.
The vast, overwhelming majority of the voting population is clustered right in the middle. They are the moderates, the independents.
Okay, simple enough.
Now, imagine 2 political parties operating on this line. Their sole objective is to win elections, which means they need to capture the maximum number of votes.
Okay, so logically, if most of the votes are in the middle, both parties should sprint toward the center.
That's exactly what the model predicts. A rational, vote-maximizing party will abandon its extreme ideologies and move its platform as close to the moderate center as possible.
Because that's where the math works.
Right. And because the party managers make a very cynical calculation about their fringe voters. Let's say a right-wing party moves toward the center. The party bosses look at the extreme far-right voters and say, "We don't need to pander to you anymore. We can ignore your demands."
Why? Wouldn't they lose their votes?
Because who else are you going to vote for? You hate the left-wing party even more than you hate us. You have no exit option. You are captive. Therefore, we can take your vote for granted while we chase the moderates.
It makes logical sense. If the fringe has nowhere else to go, they are powerless. The party doesn't need to listen to them.
What?
But anyone who has watched politics in the last 50 years knows that is not how it actually works. The parties don't ignore the fringe. They seem terrified of the fringe.
Terrified.
They constantly pander to their most extreme activists, often at the expense of alienating the moderate center. Why does the hoteling model fail so spectacularly in reality?
It fails because it fundamentally misunderstands the psychology of a captive audience. The hoteling model assumes that the inability to exit makes a voter weak.
Right.
Hirschman's framework reveals that having nowhere else to go is actually the source of their superpower.
Wait, being trapped gives you power. How?
Because the extreme activists care deeply about ideology, and because they are violently opposed to the other party, they cannot simply walk away from politics. They are trapped inside their party.
But they're not going to sit quietly.
Exactly. Because they lack the exit option, they possess the highest possible motivation to utilize the voice option. And their voice is not just a whisper, it is a deafening, highly organized roar.
Because they have all this pent-up energy and nowhere to disperse it.
Precisely. The moderate voter might casually pull a lever on election day, but the captive extremist, they spend 80 hours a week organizing grassroots campaigns. They write thousands of letters to their representatives.
They launch primary challenges against incumbents.
They show up at every town hall meeting and scream until they are hoarse. They make the daily lives of the moderate party managers an absolute, unmitigated living hell.
They substitute the threat of walking away with the sheer, overwhelming volume of their voice.
They create so much internal friction that the party management just breaks down.
Okay, give me an example of this. When has this actually broken the math of an election?
The source material points to a pivotal moment in American political history, the 1964 Republican presidential nomination of Barry Goldwater.
Okay, 1964.
Again, analyzing this purely through the lens of structural mechanics. Goldwater was positioned on the far-right fringe of the political spectrum at the time.
And according to the hoteling model, nominating a fringe candidate should be political suicide because you are voluntarily handing the entire massive cluster of moderate voters in the center to the opposing party.
And that is exactly what the traditional political scientists predicted, and it is exactly what ultimately happened in the general election, a massive landslide defeat.
So the math held up in the general election.
Yes, but the question is, if the rational, vote-maximizing strategy was to nominate a moderate, why did the party apparatus surrender and nominate Goldwater in the primary?
Why did they walk willingly into a buzzsaw?
Because the captive, far-right activist within the party structure exerted a level of voice that was mathematically impossible for the party leadership to ignore.
They forced their hand.
These activists had nowhere else to go, so they generated a deafening, high-frequency internal pressure cooker. They dominated the primary apparatus. Their voice was so intense, so organized, and so emotionally exhausting to fight against that the party leadership basically capitulated just to appease them.
So it was easier to lose the general election than to fight their own fringe.
The internal cost of ignoring the extremists became higher than the external cost of losing the general election. The fringe held the entire massive party structure hostage, not by threatening to leave, but by threatening to make internal life unbearable if they were ignored.
That is a staggering realization. The people who absolutely cannot leave a system are the ones who end up stewing the ship simply because they are the loudest people on board.
It's the paradox of the captive.
If you can easily leave a club that you don't like, you just leave.
Yeah.
You don't spend 3 years organizing a hostile takeover of the club's board of directors. You only do that if leaving is impossible. Which brings us to a massive structural question. If exit is so incredibly destructive to the feedback loop of a company causing the Nigerian railway to rot, and if it causes public schools to collapse into a death spiral, and if it prevents countries from forging durable social contracts, what actually prevents the entire world from just instantly falling apart?
That's the billion-dollar question.
Because human beings are naturally lazy, we want the frictionless path. If exit is always the easiest option, why doesn't every single organization instantly dissolve the moment things get slightly difficult?
The answer lies in a deeply irrational human emotion that has been coded into us for a brilliant, highly rational evolutionary purpose.
Okay, what emotion?
We are talking about the mechanics of loyalty.
Loyalty, like blind loyalty to a sports team that hasn't won a championship in 40 years.
Exactly. Or loyalty to a car brand that keeps breaking down, or loyalty to a nation whose policies you fundamentally disagree with.
Yeah. On a purely economic spreadsheet, blind loyalty looks incredibly stupid. Why would a rational consumer continue to purchase a degraded product when a superior alternative exists?
They wouldn't.
Why would a citizen stay in a failing state? But from a systems design perspective, loyalty is a vital, life-saving feature.
Because loyalty is the mechanism that artificially raises the cost of leaving.
It inserts a massive emotional tax on the exit option.
It makes it psychologically painful to walk away. By imposing that emotional pain, loyalty acts as the ultimate shield against that death trap of quasi-perfect competition we discussed earlier.
It slows down the mass exodus.
Think about a complex organization entering a period of decay. The most alert, intelligent, quality-conscious members are the first to realize the ship is sinking. If they act purely rationally, they instantly take the exit and the ship sinks immediately.
Because they take all the problem-solving brainpower with them to the lifeboats.
Exactly. But if those brilliant, sensitive members possess a deep, irrational loyalty to the organization, their behavior changes.
They stay.
They see the water rising. They know they could easily escape, but the emotional cost of abandoning the ship is too high. So, loyalty locks the smartest people inside the burning building.
Wow.
And because they are trapped inside by their own emotions, but they are smart enough to know they will die if the fire isn't put out, what must they do?
They are forced to use their voice. They have to grab a bucket and start fighting the fire. I love this company or this country too much to watch it die, so I am going to stay and fight the leadership to fix it.
Precisely. Loyalty prevents the premature, instantaneous destruction of the system by forcing the most capable critics to delay their exit and deploy their voice.
It buys the organization the most precious commodity in existence, the time to heal.
It does. But this protective shield has a very dangerous dark side. Because loyalty is an emotion, it fundamentally distorts our perception of reality. It creates a psychological blind spot.
Because we love the thing, we don't want to admit it's getting worse. We lie to ourselves to protect our emotional investment.
We engage in a profound level of self-deception. The source material highlights a famous psychological experiment that perfectly illustrates how this visual and cognitive distortion works. It is known as the cat and dog illusion.
I found this study absolutely mesmerizing. Let's walk the listener through exactly how the researchers set this up.
So the researchers created a sequence of visual cards. The very first card shows a clear, unambiguous line drawing of a cat.
Just a normal cat.
Right. The next card in the sequence is slightly altered. The ears are a tiny bit different. The snout is a fraction of an inch longer. The next card is altered a bit more.
It's morphing.
The sequence continues through dozens of cards, slowly morphing. By the time you reach the very last card, the image is unquestionably a drawing of a dog.
So it's a slow-motion transition from one reality to another.
Now, the researchers conduct the test in two different ways. If they just pull a card from the middle of the deck and show it to a random person, the person will usually identify it as some weird hybrid, or they will start calling it a dog relatively early in the transition.
Because they don't have any preconceived bias.
Exactly. But if the researchers show the cards in sequential order, starting with the very first unambiguous cat, a fascinating psychological glitch occurs.
What happens?
The subject sees the cat. They internalize that they're looking at a cat. As the cards slowly morph, the subject continues to confidently declare, "That is a cat."
Even when it starts looking like a dog.
They will continue to call it a cat long after the image has visually crossed the threshold and looks exactly like a dog.
Their brain refuses to update the software. They are loyal to their initial perception of the cat.
It is a massive cognitive inertia. They are unconsciously loyal to the baseline reality they fell in love with.
And we apply this exact same psychological mechanism to the institutions we are loyal to.
Absolutely. Our political parties, our country, our favorite brands, our spouses. When a system begins a slow, chronic decay, the loyalist is completely blind to it.
The quality drops, the corruption creeps in, the product morphs from a cat into a dog, but the loyalist keeps defending it.
Oh, the quality hasn't dropped, it's just a bad quarter. The party hasn't lost its moral compass, it's just a minor scandal. The media is blowing it out of proportion.
They justify the decay because acknowledging it would break their heart. But wait, if loyalty blinds them to the decay, doesn't that defeat the whole purpose? If they don't see the fire, they won't use their voice to put it out.
That is the ultimate tragedy of unconscious loyalty. By the time the decay becomes so catastrophic, so undeniable, that the loyalist finally wakes up from the illusion and realizes the cat is a dog.
It's too late.
The organization is usually so deeply rotted that it is beyond saving. They miss the optimal window to use their voice, and when the illusion finally shatters, the psychological whiplash is violent.
I bet.
This leads to a brutal, harsh reality for businesses, a phenomenon economists call the split demand curve.
This is the concept that every CEO, every politician, and honestly, every person in a long-term relationship needs to hear. Walk us through the economics of a broken heart.
When a casual customer experiences a drop in quality, they just leave. No hard feelings. But when a loyalist finally reaches their breaking point, when the cognitive dissonance becomes too heavy, the betrayal too deep, and they finally hit the exit button, the emotional bridge is incinerated.
They do not just leave, they leave with a profound sense of resentment.
Because they feel like an idiot. They defended the company to their friends, they invested their identity in the brand, and the brand made a fool of them.
Yes, the psychological contract has been breached.
And because of that betrayal, the demand curve permanently splits. Let's say the company hits rock bottom, fires the CEO, brings in new management, and miraculously fixes the product. They restore the quality to the exact 100% standard it used to be.
Okay, so the product is good again.
A casual customer might see the improvement and return. But the former loyalist. The loyalist will almost never come back for the same price and quality.
Because the baseline trust is gone.
Yes, exactly. To even consider returning, the former loyalist requires a massive, almost impossible safety margin. If the original quality was an 8 out of 10, the company now has to offer them a 12 out of 10 at a lower price just to overcome the lingering resentment of the betrayal.
The supply and demand pathways completely bifurcate. Once you break the bond of a loyalist by exploiting their blindness, the damage is essentially permanent.
It's incredibly hard to win them back.
So loyalty is this incredible superweapon that saves you from short-term crises, but if management abuses it and takes it for granted, it turns into a nuclear bomb that permanently destroys the core user base.
That's a great summary.
Now, the loyalty we just discussed, brand loyalty, sports teams, that is mostly organic. You just happen to like the thing. But what happens when an organization artificially forces you to be loyal?
Oh, engineered loyalty.
What happens when they engineer a system where you have to pay a massive, painful price just to get your foot in the door?
We are entering the realm of high entry costs and the deliberate weaponization of cognitive dissonance. Think about organizations that require a grueling initiation.
Like what?
It could be a college fraternity hazing ritual, the grueling selection process for an elite military special forces unit, or the immense personal risk required to join a radical underground political movement.
You are paying in blood, sweat, tears, or massive amounts of money just to get the membership card.
You have paid the ultimate entry cost. Now, apply the psychological theory of cognitive dissonance. What happens if, after enduring all that suffering, humiliation, or financial ruin to join the group, you finally get inside and realize the group is actually incredibly mediocre?
Oh, no.
The meetings are boring, the leadership is incompetent, the policies are deeply flawed.
Your brain would short circuit. You cannot look in the mirror and say, I just let myself be humiliated for 6 months, or I just spent $100,000 to join a garbage organization. That realization is too psychologically agonizing.
The human ego cannot tolerate that level of dissonance. So the brain has to resolve the conflict. And it does so by deploying a radical psychological defense mechanism.
What does the brain do?
First, it convinces itself the group is actually amazing, but it takes it a critical step further. The member explodes with a manic, obsessive, highly destructive energy to fix the organization's flaws.
Because they can't leave.
Because they cannot use the action.
Yeah.
Leaving would mean admitting the initial suffering was for nothing. They utilize an extreme, hyper-aggressive version of voice.
I suffered for this, so this organization is going to be perfect whether the leadership likes it or not.
Exactly. They will stop at nothing to reform the group, to aggressively purge the incompetence, to force the organization to live up to the idealized, perfect version they built in their head to justify their own past suffering.
That is intense.
And if we take this psychological quirk and apply it to macro history, it provides a chilling explanation for one of the darkest patterns in human civilization.
What pattern?
It explains why revolutions almost always end up eating their own children.
Okay, that is a massive conceptual leap. From fraternity hazing to the reign of terror, connect the dots for us. How does high entry cost dictate the fate of a revolution?
Think about the founding fathers of any new nation, or the vanguard of a revolutionary regime. Think about the Bolsheviks in Russia or the Jacobins in France.
Okay.
They paid the absolute highest entry cost possible to establish the new system. They risked the guillotine. They spent years in frozen gulags. They fought in muddy trenches. They watched their friends die. They paid in blood to build the new state.
Their sunk cost is infinite.
Now, the revolution succeeds. The new government is established. But reality sets in.
Reality is always messy.
Governing is hard. The new administration is slightly corrupt, the bureaucracy is slow, the utopian promises have to be compromised to deal with grain shortages. The new state is disappointing.
Okay, so what does a normal person do?
A normal citizen who experiences this disappointment might just shrug, keep their head down, or emigrate. They take the exit.
But the revolutionary finder cannot emigrate. They cannot go back to being a shoemaker.
If they accept the mediocrity of the new state, it means the friends who died in the trenches died for a mediocre bureaucracy. The cognitive dissonance is world-shattering.
So what do?
They refuse to stay silent. They deploy an aggressive, ideologically pure, regime-threatening voice. They scream from the rooftops that the revolution has been betrayed. They organize radical factions. They demand absolute perfection for the new government.
They become the biggest threat to the very thing they created.
And so, what is the new government, the new management, forced to do to maintain stability? The tragic, inevitable fate is that the new regime must physically eliminate them.
Wow.
To stabilize the state, the pragmatic new leaders must purge, imprison, or execute the very heroes who founded it. Because the founders' insanely high entry cost makes their voice too radical, too uncompromising to ever be contained.
That is absolutely chilling. They aren't killed because they are traitors. They are killed because their loyalty is too intense, they care too much, and they literally cannot walk away.
It's a tragic cycle.
We've seen the destructive power of systems where it costs a massive amount to enter. But the framework has one final, terrifying escalation. What happens when we flip the equation entirely?
The total lockdown.
What happens when the cost of leaving a system is death?
We are moving from the psychology of revolutionaries to the architecture of totalitarianism. We are looking at systems where the exit option isn't just socially difficult, it is explicitly criminalized.
Totalitarian dictatorships, mafia syndicates, extreme religious cults.
Right. In these organizations, attempting to leave is met with absolute punishment. Exile to a labor camp, excommunication, or a bullet to the back of the head.
So the exit option is officially erased from the board. You cannot leave.
It is erased. But we have to remember the fundamental balance of Hirschman's theory. Voice, the act of complaining and demanding reform, is only truly effective if it is backed by the credible threat of exit.
Ah, I see.
If a manager knows a valuable employee is willing to quit, the manager listens to the employee's complaints. The threat of exit is the engine that gives voice its power.
Right. If my boss knows I'm legally bound to work there forever, he doesn't give a damn if I complain about the working conditions.
Exactly. When a totalitarian regime imposes a death penalty on exit, they don't just stop people from fleeing. They inadvertently kill the threat of exit. And by killing the threat of exit, they completely castrate the power of voice.
Because complaining is useless and dangerous.
People realize that complaining is not only useless, it's deadly. So the voice goes silent. The citizens put on their masks, they cheer at the parades, and they keep their mouths shut.
And from the outside, the regime looks incredibly stable. Everyone is cheering.
But look at it from the perspective of the dictator. Without exit and without voice, what is the information diet of the leadership?
They hear absolutely nothing but praise.
They are surrounded by terrified sycophants who tell them every policy is a genius stroke. Because management receives zero negative feedback, the system goes completely medically blind to its own entropy.
The rot accelerates in the dark.
The infrastructure crumbles, the economy hollows out, but the reports sent to the capital say production is up 200%. The organization sprints into the abyss at full speed, cheering all the way down until the entire structure collapses overnight.
It's totalitarian deafness. They build a massive wall with guard towers to keep the citizens trapped inside, and that exact same wall ends up blinding the dictator to the fact that the city inside is burning to the ground.
It's the ultimate self-defeating architecture.
This brings us to the final and perhaps most existential concept in the source material, the tragedy of public evils. Because even in a free society with open borders, there are some things you simply cannot exit from.
We all understand the concept of a public good, a highway, clean air, a public park. The inverse of that is a public evil.
Systemic, encompassing disasters.
Total environmental collapse, runaway artificial intelligence, a global pandemic, or the classic Cold War example, a thermonuclear exchange.
Things that affect the entire planet. There is no private alternative.
Right. If you don't like the public school, you can buy an exit to a private school. That is a successful escape. But you cannot buy a private exit from a nuclear winter.
No amount of money saves you from that.
You cannot exit the total decay of a superpower state. because the catastrophic collapse of that state will crush the global economy and pull you down under the rubble regardless of where you try to hide.
Your physical body might move to a bunker in New Zealand, but you haven't actually escaped the consequences of the failure. You are still trapped by the public evil.
And this unavoidable entrapment creates a deeply perverse psychological loop, particularly for the people sitting at the very top of the power structure.
How does it affect them?
It answers a historical question that always baffles the public. Why don't brilliant, moral, highly ethical cabinet members or corporate executives resign in protest when a government or a company slides into an obvious catastrophic disaster?
The classic example the material uses is the Johnson administration during the escalation of the Vietnam War.
Yes, perfect example.
You had rooms full of incredibly smart Ivy League educated officials who privately knew the war was a meat grinder and a strategic failure. But they didn't resign. They didn't take the exit. The cynical view is just that they were power hungry and wanted to keep their fancy titles. Is there more to it than that?
Power is a factor, sure, but the rationalization they use, the good official perverse loop, is much more insidious and complex. Because they are dealing with a public evil, a war that could spiral into a global conflict, exit feels insufficient.
What do they tell themselves?
They tell themselves this policy is an absolute disaster, but the situation is so fragile, so dangerous that if I quit, the absolute lunatic who replaces me will push the button and literally end the world. I am the only adult left in the room. I must stay to pump the brakes.
I have to stay inside the machine, complicit in the evil, to prevent the ultimate evil.
Yes, they convince themselves that remaining complicit is actually an act of supreme, sacrificial public service. Because the evil is so vast, taking the exit and walking away feels like a dereliction of moral duty.
But the trap is, by staying inside the room, they don't actually stop the machine. They just end up giving the disastrous policy a veneer of respectability. They lend their good name to a terrible cause.
They provide the regime with intellectual camouflage. And the terrifying part is that astute leadership knows exactly how to manipulate this psychology.
How do they manipulate it?
They manage these internal dissenters using a tactic called the devil's advocate trap.
I need to know how this works. How does a president or a CEO neutralize a brilliant subordinate who knows the policy is wrong?
Let's look at George Ball during the Johnson administration. He was the known vocal dissenter on the escalation of Vietnam. He thought the bombing campaigns were a tragic mistake.
Okay.
So what did Lyndon B. Johnson do? Did he fire George Ball? No. He institutionalized him.
What does that mean?
He put George Ball in a designated chair at the cabinet table and essentially said, George, you are our official in-house critic. Your job is to rigorously tell us why we are wrong.
On the surface, that sounds like brilliant leadership. It sounds like the president is actively encouraging dissent and trying to avoid groupthink.
It sounds wonderful, and it serves a brilliant psychological purpose for the dissenter. George Ball gets to feel heard. He gets to deploy his voice, the highest level of power.
But it's a trap.
It is a devastating trap. By designating him the official dissenter, his voice is entirely domesticated. It becomes a scheduled performance. When George speaks, the rest of the cabinet doesn't hear a shocking warning. They just hear George playing his assigned role. They factor his complaints into the background noise.
Oh, it's Tuesday. Time for George to complain about the bombing targets.
Exactly. And here is the fatal catch. To be granted the privilege of playing this devil's advocate role, the dissenter must agree to an unspoken contract. They must promise to be a team player in public. They must promise not to resign in a blaze of glory and leaks their dissent to the press.
They trade away their exit option.
They completely surrender the threat of exit for the privilege of using a neutered, captive voice inside a closed room.
That's insidious.
The management listens politely. They nod their heads. They check the bureaucratic box that says, we rigorously debated the opposing views, and then they proceed to completely ignore the dissenter and execute the disastrous policy anyway. It is the ultimate emasculation of the recuperation mechanism.
Wow. They get the psychological relief of speaking truth to power, but they surrender the only weapon that actually has teeth, the threat of walking out the door and exposing the failure to the world. It shows just how incredibly delicate the machinery of accountability really is.
It is a very fragile balance.
We have covered a massive expanse of human behavior today. We started with the rescue tracks at the Nigerian railway. We walked through the death trap of perfect competition. We explored why monopolies love a little competition, why exiles destroy nations, why extreme voters hold parties hostage, and finally, how totalitarian states and cabinet rooms blind themselves to their own destruction.
If there is a unifying through line to all of these disparate phenomena, it is that the survival of human systems is incredibly fragile. The forces that correct organizational decay, exit, and voice are not automatic laws of physics. They require a precise, almost impossible balance to function correctly.
So what happens if you get it wrong?
If you rely too heavily on people walking away, if you design a system entirely around frictionless exit, your organization bleeds out its smartest, most capable critics and rots in total silence.
But if you swing the pendulum the other way and rely entirely on people staying and fighting voice without ever giving them the credible threat of leaving, the leadership just builds thicker walls, puts on noise-canceling headphones, and the entire system becomes a hostage to whoever can scream the loudest.
The optimal mix of leaving and speaking up is a constantly shifting target.
So, what is the final takeaway for you listening to this right now? I think this framework is a profound call to audit the mechanics of your own life. Look at your career, your relationships, the community organizations you volunteer for.
Ask yourself some hard questions.
Right. Ask yourself, are you defaulting to the American ideology of frictionless escape? Are you taking the exit too early? Are you swiping left, quitting the job, or abandoning the difficult project without ever doing the hard, messy, exhausting work of using your voice to try and fix it? Are you acting like the elite parents fleeing the public school, taking your valuable perspective and your problem-solving skills with you and leaving the vulnerable behind?
Or consider the inverse. Are you trapped in a perverse loop of blind loyalty? Are you staying in a toxic corporate culture or a fundamentally broken relationship out of a false, noble sense of duty?
Are you staring at a dog and trying to convince yourself it's still a cat?
Exactly. Are you telling yourself, if I leave, it will all fall apart, while your voice is being completely domesticated by a lazy monopolist who has already factored your suffering into their profit margins?
It is a terrifying mirror to hold up. But I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over. The source material warns us about the immense danger of closed borders and totalitarian traps. What happens to a society when physical exits are removed and humanity is locked in a room together?
The global scale of this is daunting.
Look at the physical state of our planet today. The geographic frontiers are gone. There's no more Wild West to escape to. The global supply chains are locked in. The walls are getting higher. In the physical world, our easy exits are rapidly disappearing. We are being forced into a scenario where we have to use our voice to fix the climate, the economy, and the geopolitical order. We are trapped in the room together.
Yeah.
But right as those physical doors are locking, the tech monopolies in Silicon Valley are spending trillions of dollars to build the ultimate frictionless escape hatch. They are building virtual reality, the metaverse, entire digital universes meticulously designed to be infinitely more comfortable, more customizable, and utterly devoid of the friction of the real world.
A digital exit.
If the physical world becomes too difficult, too polluted, too politically fractured, will humanity do what it has historically always done? Will we take the easy exit? Will we entirely abandon the messy, painful, agonizing voice required to actually fix our decaying physical planet and instead just put on a headset and silently slip into a perfect, infinite digital illusion?
A mass exodus into code.
A world of billions of people executing the ultimate mass exit, leaving the physical machinery of civilization to rot in silence. Think about that the next time you feel the overwhelming urge to just walk away from a problem. We will see you on the next deep dive.